All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, Mobile APIs and Frameworks, and this is week 1, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about what's an API, and we're also going to do some setup in this part. Again, today we may not spend the entire 3 hours. We'll see how it goes. I would say that, and then I end up spending the 3 hours. But it is what it is. So I'm just going to hop to where we were last time, which is, hey, what is an API anyway? So people have really weird ideas about what an API is, but let's just define it in simple terms. It stands for Application Programming Interface. That's what it is. And really, when I think about an API, I always think about request response, because my APIs are all REST type of APIs. There's other types of APIs as well, but to me, it's about REST, request, response. And when I think about a request response, I think about a round trip. Goes to the server, does something black box on the server, you don't know what's happening, and then get a response back. If you don't get a response back, something went wrong, and you should be able to check to see that that didn't happen. Okay, so that's what's happening there. Request response. And as you can see, I'm not reading. There's different types of APIs, like we said, RESTful APIs, SOAP APIs, GraphQL APIs. I'd love to talk about GraphQL. I don't think we're going to have time in this course to do it because it's very popular. But more or less, what we want to do is you make a request to the server, and the server connects up to some kind of data source. Could be MongoDB, could be Firebase, could be whatever, and then it returns a response, usually in the form of JSON data. Okay, so what you've been using before, I'm not sure if you've done that yet. Yes, you have. Okay, so you get JSON data back, and then from that JSON data, you're going to basically consume the API, because there's going to be something called an API endpoint that you guys are going to be creating. Okay, and that's how it's going to work. Although we haven't talked about it, we will be using MVC pattern, which you guys should also know, Model View Controller. And Model View Controller is just a design pattern, right? You can use it or not use it. I use it because of separation of concerns. That's what it's all about. And I'm just going to bring up one of my favorite books to talk about for you guys and to challenge you guys a little bit, which is called Object-Oriented Design Patterns. And Object-Oriented Design Patterns, there was a book, Design Patterns, Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Software, back in the 90s, an old guy, I told you, right? And you can get it on Amazon for a pretty decent price still. It's not an easy read. You can see it's 1994. And you're like, wait, 1994, why are you talking about it? We're in 2023. Because they're awesome. Design patterns, kind of permeate everything we do with software engineering, right? You guys should know a bunch of design patterns already. And here are the ones you should know. State. You should know about state design patterns. You should know about the observer pattern by this point, okay, in your time. And singleton design pattern is a very common design pattern as well. Singleton factory design pattern, which you guys should know about if you've done Kotlin or Java or anything like that. If you don't know those things, you should. And there are 23 design patterns. I challenge you to learn as many as you can before you leave Georgian, right? Because each of these design patterns has been worked on, tested, and so on. There are other books that are easier to read than this one. This is an older book, but this is the grandfather of all design pattern books, and that's why I'm giving it to you as a reference. I'm sure it's available in our library, remote, and you can probably get it in PDF format in other ways, right? However, I'm not going to stop talking about it, because I talk about it with every one of my courses, because it's probably the one thing that makes life a little easier, especially when it comes to how to set things up and some principles, design principles. Other things that I'm going to be following a lot are the solid design principles. You guys should know that as well. Solid design principles, yes? No? No. Solid design principles. Single responsibility principle, the open-close principle, list-off substitution principle, interface segregation principle, and the dependency inversion principle. We're going to talk about those in detail, not this day, but we'll talk about that on other days. And a lot of times what I think about when I think about the single responsibility principle, it's kind of the governing thing when I think about how things should be. Here's an example. Every class should do one thing. Every method should have one responsibility, right? If you have a method that does more than one that has more responsibility, more than one, That means it's more difficult to test, right? We want to make our code testable, right? And therefore, each method should have only one job, right? For the most part. There's going to be sometimes we can't do it, right? And I'm talking about this because a lot of times you'll see, programmers, putting a bunch of reusable code into one big chunk, and then they're like, hey, test that now. What output do you want from that method? What do you expect the output or the, is going to be? And you might not have an idea of what that is. All right, so solid design principles, we're going to be using that. Also, there's another thing, there's something called dry and wet, dry versus wet coding, right? And dry, if you look it up, stands for don't repeat yourself, and wet is write everything twice. Okay? We don't want to write everything twice ever, right? So whenever you see me doing something and you're looking at it going, wait, that's wrong, Tom, that you've written that before, right? Point it out, guys. By the way, I'll probably say it myself. I'll probably say something like, this code sucks. We need to rewrite this thing because you can see here, we can reuse it over here, right? And so I want you guys to think about this idea of dry versus wet. Do it right first time is not what I kind of go with. If you and I were going to build a house, all right, and we're going to construct the house, we probably use a blueprint. And you know what? You probably want to do it right the first time. But here's something that we know about software engineering in general, no matter what software engineering we're talking about, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't even know if we can do it sometimes with software engineering. We're trying to do something and we don't know if it's going to work out. There's a lot of pivoting that happens in software engineering. And that's why these games like Redfall don't quite turn out the way you think they're going to turn out, right? Hopefully Starfield is going to be better. Let's see what happens, right? This is always buggy code. But anyways, the idea here is that I'm never going to say, do it right the first time. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, keep it dry. Don't repeat yourself as much as you can, right? But we're going to do it like this. My motto is, and this is what I wanted to share with you, is make it work, then refactor. That is my motto. So make it work first. If it doesn't work, who cares how clean it is? Who cares how beautiful it is, right? I don't care if it's beautiful code if it doesn't work, right? So if you give me stuff that doesn't work, that's why I said to you, I don't care about, reading your code. I want to know that it works. If it doesn't work, it's useless to me and useless to the customer too, that you're probably going to be working for in some way or another. All right, so that's the principles that I'm going to be using. Back to this though. So again, request response. We're going to be using MVC pattern. MVC is just another design pattern, right? And it's a derivative of other design patterns out there. The 23 design patterns we just talked about. Okay. How do we build an API? I know this is a visual slide, but it's kind of exactly what we want to think about, which is we usually define the purpose of an API. Why are we building this thing in the first place? Like, do we want access to data? Am I going to give you access to? Usually, it is some kind of data that we're going to use. Maybe whether it's weather data, location data, whatever kind of data. That's why we want to have this API created. Right? We want to create this API. Maybe it's brain data in the future or eye tracking data, or whatever. And then we're going to choose some kind of API design approach. Is it going to be REST? Is it going to be SOAP? Is it going to be GraphQL? What is it going to be? Then we're going to define some API endpoints and operations, some kind of functionality. We're going to choose a programming language and a framework. And then we're going to implement some data models and database connectivity. Data models for us is we're going to make a model class that connects to the data. Even if we're using MongoDB or NoSQL database, we still have something called a schema that we're going to be using, right? If we don't have a schema, there's no way of connecting to it. Now, some controversy. Should we always use a NoSQL database? What do you think? Always. No one size fits all, number one. Anytime a person says always when it comes to programming, that's not right, right? There's no always. There's no one size fits all. There's no magic bullet, none of that stuff. We use a NoSQL database when the data is simple, when we don't need relationships. We have a lot of relationships, use a relational database, guys. That's what they're for, right? We need to use the right tool for the right job. That's what we're going to do, right? So data models and the way we connect to databases, it's really depending on the kind of data that we're going to try and consume. And then we're going to implement our API using the chosen framework. We're going to test and validate, make sure it works, right? Make sure it doesn't break, make sure it's secure, make sure. And then finally, we're going to deploy our API to a server or cloud application. That is the basic way we're going to do it. Very, very simple. Now, I know I've laid this out, and it might even seem like common sense to most of you, but what if it's not? What if you've never done this kind of stuff? That's why I'm putting it out there. so you know. Okay. So what is our chosen thing? Let's talk about REST versus SOAP versus GraphQL, because I want to talk about this a little bit because they're like, I don't understand what REST means. I've heard the term. Maybe you've heard the term. Maybe you've heard SOAP. By the way, I almost never use SOAP anymore. This is something that's a little older. Why? Because there's XML in there a lot. I don't use XML. I use JSON typically, but XML is perfectly fine as well. And we got to think about the type of data transfer and kind of the way we're translating our data into some form, something that's consumable by our front end, right? So REST, to me, it speaks to me. That's why I use it. I use it because of request response. I know that I send a request, I get a response back. That's what I do. GraphQL is new, and again, it's a query language. I think there's a lot of great things that are done with GraphQL. I'd love to incorporate that something into our APIs. I don't think that it's as applicable with mobile as much, but it's great. And again, I'm talking about it only because it is kind of like the third way, in many ways, we wrap our APIs with GraphQL, and it becomes actually a little bit more reasonable. Our API design approach, like I said, we will build a REST API. We'll use Node.js Express and MongoDB as our solution stack. All right, and the reason why is because A, I'm very familiar with it, and B, it's super easy to use, and you can replace the backend with anything you want, Firebase, whatever, MariaDB, something else. Okay, and I think it's pretty good. And also, you guys know it, hopefully, so this will be more familiar to you, and this will be more in detail about how to put things together and so on. I want to get into setting up our development environment now. And again, the first thing we want to talk about is Visual Studio Code. If you have Visual Studio Code, let's go there together. My assumption is you have it, but if you don't, you can certainly download it. One thing that I always want to do with Visual Studio Code is update it. So notice here, I have a bunch of extensions that I use. My Visual Studio Code might look different than yours, and you can see that there's a bunch of extensions that are reinstalling themselves. It happens pretty much every single time I teach a semester, where if I take a break, which I haven't used Visual Studio Code last semester, because the semester before I used Visual Studio last semester, so I was teaching C++, right? There are a ton of updates, right, with Visual Studio Code. So please update your Visual Studio Code to the latest version. You'll see that there's a little clock that looks here that says it's downloading stuff. Please do that. If you don't have Visual Studio Code installed, let's go there. So if I say VS Code, I'm going to talk about this for those people who haven't done it because of whatever reason. You can get it from this site here, code.visualstudio.com. It, in my opinion, is the best editor that's out there right now. All right. Why? Remember we said Microsoft makes great tools other than Teams. But Visual Studio Code is great. I used to use other kind of things. I used to use Atom and brackets and a bunch of other stuff way back in the day. When we were, kind of where the web was growing up, and it became what it is today, and it's still growing and changing. And I think probably when I think about how difficult stuff is, I would say number one, game development is probably the most difficult thing you can do if you're going to do game, right? And then number two, it's web development. It's web development. I think it's harder than mobile development in many ways. Mobile development changes, but web development changes constantly, like nonstop. Like every semester, every month, there's something that's changing. Node has changed its versions. Something is deprecated, whatever. It's nonstop development in web. And then it's mobile, and then it's everything else, right? That's how I see it, right? Everyone has a different opinion about this, but I always believe that, stuff like this is pretty difficult to get a handle on. So that's why I kind of say that let's make sure everything is set up. You can see that here, it needs a reload that's required. I'm just going to restart and update, and it's going to update my Visual Studio Code to the latest version. So please do that if you haven't done it already. Do it with me now. All right, this is kind of the thing I want you guys to do. Okay. And you can see that I have the latest version now, and it has a bunch of stuff that's popping up saying, hey, there's stuff that you need to do and so on. We're going to be using this as our API builder, but I also want to talk about, I may use at some point, and you should have this installed, Android Studio. I may use that, and I might also use Xcode at some point as well. I might do that, right? So please be prepared. Although you may not have a Mac that's available right now. Maybe you built a Hackintosh, you know, or whatever you've done. You must have Xcode available at some point, just in case I ask you to build the front end for iOS and Android with this API, right? So you should be able to do that. But the main thing we're going to build our API with today is Visual Studio Code. And again, one thing is that people have always asked, hey Tom, what about all of these? How come your Visual Studio Code looks different than mine? Sometimes what I do is I change some of these extensions, or I remove them, or whatever, every semester, and they add different flavor to what you're going to see. So Visual Studio Code is the first thing, and I'm just going to move on to the next thing. Anyone has a problem with Visual Studio Code, whether online or in person? Okay, awesome. Next, Git and GitHub, and I'm doing this in this order. Things that I want your computer to do are the following. If you go to your command prompt with Windows, right, or you go to your terminal with Mac, you should be able to put in something like git -- version, and it should come up with something like 2.39.0 Windows or something else like that, right? If you cannot do this, you will have a problem in this semester because I'll be using command line for everything. I will not be using source tree or any kind of tool like Gitkraken or whatever. I'm not going to use the stuff built into Xcode or even Visual Studio Code. I'm going to be using command line the entire time. So that's one thing you'll get from me. I'm going to do command line all the time. Have you guys done command line before? Yes?
I haven't used the command line for that.
All right, something new. Awesome. New stuff that you're going to learn. All right, so command line is the stuff that I'm going to be using all the time. Please make sure it's working for you. Is it working? Yes. Not working, you need to make it work. And I've kind of put in here some ways of getting it. One way of getting it for Windows, for those people who don't have it working, is if you go to git-scm.com, right? If I can type in the link, there is. git-scm.com. It's not just for Windows, but also for Mac. And I'm just going to do a small example of how to update it for Windows, but you can certainly do this for Mac as well. Macs, beautiful thing about Macs, and why you've asked to get a Mac for this program, is because a Mac has a terminal built in. Mac is based on a Linux kernel, right? So it uses Darwin. And the next thing is that a Mac has Git installed by default. That's a great thing, right? But Windows doesn't. Windows doesn't have it. So I'm just going to download this for Windows anyway, and you can do the same thing for Mac. There is a Mac download for this one, and if I was going to show you what this looks like, let's just do this now. I want to talk about some features that I recommend both for Mac and for Windows. So this is what it looks like. It says only show new stuff. I'm going to show everything. And so one thing I'm going to do is, it says additional icons I want to set up for Windows. Git large file support, I don't need for this course. Check daily for Git for Windows updates. I'm not going to do that, but I do want to add a Git bash profile on the Windows side as well. So I'm just doing the Windows side first. And then click next. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code as the default editor. I'm going to click next. I'm going to let Git decide, for my initial branch name. Typically, the branch name used to be master. Master is a bad word now. We don't want to use that. And why? It doesn't make any sense. We should call it main. That's the main branch. But we let Git decide. I'm not going to decide what that is. I'm going to use Git in optional Unix tools from the command prompt, even with Windows, because I find this is better and it matches closer to what we do with on the Mac side. I'm going to use my bundled OpenSSH, and I'm also going to use the OpenSSL library when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm also going to check out Windows style and commit Unix style endings, and I'm definitely going to use Windows default console window instead of MDEV1004. I don't like using that when it comes to how I'm going to manage Git. And then default Git pulling is what I'm going to be using there. And I'm definitely, this is a hugely important thing, the Git credential manager. Oh my gosh, this is like the most important thing you can have on Windows. Because without it, Windows doesn't know who you are. I'm also going to enable file system caching and symbolic links. Again, this is all for the Windows side of the house, but not any of these experimental features. I don't like the experimental features. And then I'm going to click install. And it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to install this stuff? And it's going to install on top of my previous version of Git for Windows. Now for Mac, how about Mac? What are you going to do? Should you update your Mac? Here's the thing that I want to tell you. Mac is funny, right? And how did you guys install Node on the Mac last time? Did you guys do it direct? Did you guys use Homebrew? Did you guys use, what did you guys use for installing, Node on the Mac?
NPM.
What was that?
Just
Just direct? A link? Bad. Why? Because then you have to do sudo everything. Every time you use an npm thing, sudo npm. And sometimes it's really weird installing and uninstalling stuff, which is weird on the Mac. And so now that I have the latest version of Git, let's just test it out. I'm just using my command prompt here, which is the same as your terminal. And if I do git -- version, you can see now that I have the latest version 2.40.1. Okay. So that is the latest version of Git that I have. Your Git on your Mac might be something different. Let's see if I can access my Mac remotely. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I cannot from here, but I will have it later on this semester. But you'll see on your Mac, you'll be able to completely have access to Git. Should you update it? If you're comfortable using it, there's not a lot of design changes for Git, okay? Let's be honest. Git doesn't change all that much. If you know how to do a pull and a push and a merge, you're good to go. All right, so some of you may elect to leave it alone. I agree. Leave it alone unless it's broken, right? If you really want the latest features and you're using something on GitHub that's different, certainly you can do that. But I think most Macs now have a good version of Git that you're okay with. You don't need to do anything. Is my summary there. But here, just in case you didn't know that, it's all here. Right? What is version control? If you don't know what it is, I talk about what version control is, why I use version control, and so on. This is for you to read. I'm not going to go through these slides. This is just a kind of an overview again of why I would use it and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through these slides. And we're here at Git, and one thing I wanted to talk about here when it comes to Git is this idea of branching and merging, right? So I'm not sure if you guys have had a chance to understand how Git works. But pretty much what it is you work on the main branch, and then I may ask you to make some kind of bug fix branch or a feature branch or something else like that. And a lot of times what we want to do is when we have this feature, we want to merge that feature back into the main branch. That's what we want to do. Merging is the biggest pain in the ass. Sorry to tell you that, but that's what it is when it comes to Git and GitHub. Why? Because then you have to sift through the stuff and go, do I want to keep, Robert's file, right? Is it going to be like this? Am I going to take, Mohammed's file? Whose file am I going to take? And especially if they're using the same file like you are, which file is it going to be? My changes, their changes, whose changes, right? And that's where, branching is a little bit funky when it comes to this kind of stuff. Luckily for most of you, you'll be working on your own. Now here's something that I want you guys to do. Let's go to GitHub for a second, right? Because we're talking about Git and GitHub for a second. So again, I own the Georgian College GitHub. That's me, right? And I got this back in 2011 before GitHub was a thing. All right. So by the way, I own all of them. I own Georgian College. I own George Brown. I own Centennial College. I own Durham. I own a bunch of them, right? And it just happened to be that way. I didn't do it on purpose. I was just looking for a name. So Georgian College, that's me. It's the GitHub organization. I'll share stuff with you here on this account, on this organization. But for you, when you make your stuff, when you share your in-class exercises, I need you to make them private. Let's talk about how to do that a second. You guys know how to do private repositories? Yeah. Wonderful. Here's what I want you guys to do. Add me in as a collaborator. What I want you guys to do with all your in-class exercises is just create, one repository that's going to house all of your in-class exercises, every single one of them, right? So the overall repository, this is really tricky sometimes because they're like, wait, so that means I have to have folders inside of a bigger folder. Let's set that up. So if I was going to set up in-class exercises for MDEV1004, I need a folder for this. So I'm going to put a folder in my local system. It could be Windows, it could be Mac, it doesn't matter. Right here, I'm just using Windows today. But I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to probably put it in my downloads folder. Okay, let's do this. So I'm just going to make a brand new folder. I'm going to call this MDEV, right, 1004. There it is. And we're going to call it ICES. right? So MDEV1004, no spaces, ISIS is what I'm going to put in. This is what I recommend for you too, right? Now, there is every semester we're going to have a different semester. This semester is in the summer of 2023, and that's how I code things. Whenever you see things on YouTube for me, speaking of YouTube, if you go to youtube.com and if you look at Tom Siliopoulos, my whole name, you'll see that I have this channel. This is where I'm going to share my videos with you as well, right? So you're going to see that there's going to be different things that I've shared here over the years. Some of them here at Georgian, some of them are going to be at other institutions. It's okay. But this semester, what I'm going to do is not only am I going to record your stuff, but also put them up on YouTube to make it easier for you, to watch. I know sometimes watching a recording on Teams is not the greatest. Same. So, and not accessible from one semester to the other sometimes as well. So this way it'll be accessible. I'll put it up on YouTube after this. I would have done it synchronously, but I couldn't make my OBS work today. So, and I'm not going to slow myself down if I do it from on my web. All right, so that's where it is. So going back to this, now that I've made my file, my folder, which is this MDEV1004, and this is the containing folder. What I want to do here is I want to make the in-class exercise for today. So what I'm going to do is make another folder, so that together, and I'm going to say something like MDEV1004. Again, I'll say that, and it'll be something like in the summer 2023, and it'll be ICE 1. So this way it's encoded and encoded. Like you can't get away from like what this is. This is in-class exercise 1 for MDEV1004. By the way, for those people who are watching and those people who are watching the video or being here live, this is part of your in-class exercise 1 that we're doing right now. Follow along. It's an easy 4%, right? Let's see how many people actually do this one. By the way, the first in-class exercise is very low take for some reason. I don't know why. Right? But remember, it doesn't matter. You still get one free one regardless, even if you can't get this one. But the reason why this is so important to get done is because I want this in the exact way that I'm showing you right now. So first, I've got this done. Then what I want to do is I want to take this one and put it in, just drag and drop it into VS Code. So not the in-class exercise itself, but the containing folder here. So the whole containing folder, which is all the ICEs, I'm going to drag into here. You're going to see that there's MDEV1004 in here. This is where we're going to put in our gitignore file. If we're going to put a gitignore file or anything like that, it'll be in this at this level. We'll see if we need that. Right now, we won't. Okay, so for now, no gitignore file. Later on, we may elect to put them in, depending on what we're going to do. When we have our ICEs, you'll have every folder will be a new in-class exercise, and we'll be working within the folder itself a lot of times, right? But we'll have access to all of them. What I'll be doing is I might make minor changes to our API every week over week. Instead of making a new branch, which is also an option, having one repository, just making another branch, another branch, another branch, I'm going to elect to do different folders that are going to be in the same repository. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing. So here in this one, I want to put this up on GitHub, and I'm going to use command line. The way to get to command line from Visual Studio Code is, what is it?
Terminal.
Yeah, how do you do it? What's the shortcut key? Command backtick, my friends, or control backtick. So backtick is the little the thing under the tilde character on your keyboard, right? That backtick character also gives us a formatted string, right? In ECMAScript 2015, 2016, 2017, whatever. And I'm going to do that. So I'm going to say control or command backtick, which is going to bring up my little terminal, an integrated terminal here in this part right here. What I want to do at this level, not at the sub level, not inside this folder, but at the outer containing folder for in-class exercise, I want to say git init. Git init is our first command. It initializes the repository and it creates a hidden.git folder. The hidden.git folder for git init is called .git. And what it does is, if you have this hidden.git folder, this is where all the changes to your baseline code are going to be stored. Things to note: if your repository, if your folders are empty, they will not be going up to GitHub. So if I have a structure and if I have an empty folder, it'll be ignored. So for now, because we don't have anything in our MDEV, kind of in-class exercise one, let's just click on this folder, right click, and I want to add in a new file that I'm going to call .getkeep. Okay, the .getkeep file, you can put it in any folder to retain the folder structure that you want to have. This is kind of the first lesson you should know. We can always remove this file. Okay, it's just a file to retain our structure. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, and I've added it in. So these are the files. Notice that Visual Studio Code says there is an update. That's what U means. Okay. What I want to do now is I want to add all my files and folders to my Git repository. So I'm going to say git add dot. Git add dot is the next command you should learn. Right? Add. Usually when you have a command line program, the name of the command line program could be git or something else. Then you'll have some kind of verb, add, remove, push, pull. That's the verb to do something. This is an action or an operation that you want the program to take. Finally, some kind of arguments. In this case, I'm saying add everything. That's what dot means. Git add everything. And that means everything that's inside of these folders. Notice now, inside of Visual Studio Code, the U changed to an A for me, right? So maybe yours doesn't show this. Does yours show this?
Yes.
Hopefully, yes. Thank goodness, right?
The icons don't show though. Like,
Because I have extensions to make my Visual Studio Code look different. You can get VS Code icons. If you download that extension, it'll add beautiful little icons. Okay? I like making mine nice looking. That's why I did. All right, so git add dot. That's the next command. And git add dot added everything in our folder structure, which is also this .getkeep. Now I want to add a commit. This is the third thing we're going to do, right? So git commit minus M for message, and then the friendly message that we're going to have. Usually when we make a brand new repository, guys, it's usually first commit or initial commit. Those are the two, first commit or initial commit. I'm going to use initial commit because that's what I like to use. All right. And then now I've made a repository. Notice that the U and the A disappeared from getkeep because now I've made my first commit. What is a commit? If you were going to explain this in an interview, what is a commit? By the way, even Daryl, if you want to talk about it, you can always pop in there and you can say it since you're here with us. What is a commit? Don't give me the Google answer. I want you to tell me from your knowledge. What is a commit?
It's like you added all your files to the Git.
Okay.
Push is remaining. Final.
Okay, you're adding stuff in. What about you? What's a commit?
commit is like applying the stuff permanently.
Okay, making change permanently. What about Daryl? Any thoughts on what a commit is? Daryl, don't look it up. Just tell me what a commit is in your own words. Go.
Well, what we do is once we are ready with our changes, what codes we have, like what we have worked on, we add it. Once we add it, we tell Git that, hey, these are the files I want to push, and I'm sure about these files to be present in my repository. Like suppose I'm working with 10 files right now, and and after working with 10 files, I'm sure about 4 files being perfect. So I'm like, okay, these 4 files, I can share it to the world. So I add them. And once I add them, I'd like, hey, commit. These are the 4 files I'm adding, and with a message saying that these are the changes done with that files. And according
very
to me,
good.
that's
So-
the commit.
So here's a short way of saying all that. It's a snapshot of your current file base. That's what it is, right? So what we want to do when we do our commit, right? The first commit that we do is kind of our baseline. It kind of says, hey, this is our baseline where we start off our files. Everything else after that first commit is a modification of our baseline files. That's what they are, right? We need some kind of baseline or foundation, and it's a snapshot. That first snapshot gives us our code base. This is our code base. And every single time we do another commit, just like Daryl was saying, when we add files to the commit, we mark certain files. We can mark one file or all files. It's up to you, right? We can also unmark stuff. We can delete files from the commit. We can remove things too, right? But whenever we do that, whenever we make changes to our file base, it changes our baseline. It goes to that next baseline. It's almost like it moves our development, the way we're developing things from, one state of being to the next state. Now our files are in a new state. Okay, now our files are in another state. And we're going to keep on moving those files along as we keep on adding and modifying and deleting. So now we've done our first commit, we've got our baseline, and now we need to put this up on GitHub. But I can't do it. The reason why is I don't have something called a remote. I need to configure my repository so it, excuse me, knows about the remote. And I can't do that unless I have the remote information. Let's do it. So back to GitHub. Here I am in GitHub. I'm going to make a brand new repository. So for you, this is for you. For this in-class exercise, that's the easiest thing ever. Let's see if I can actually sign in here and if they'll accept me, or maybe not. By the way, I know I'm being slowed down by multi-factor authentication. I highly recommend you do so as well. I can't tell you in the last little while how many of my friends, whether they're in business, or at home, have been hacked, right? And I'm talking everything from GitHub to Twitter to Facebook to I can't tell you how many things, right? They've just been hacked nonstop. All right. So please make sure you use multi-factor authentication for everything as much as possible. All right. So now that I've logged in, I'm going to click New here, and I'm going to create my brand new repository. Now this is my owner. That's me, Georgian College. But you are going to have your account. That's where you're doing it. Now, again, the assumption is you have a GitHub account at this point. There are some assumptions, okay? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it private so you see the process. And then I'm going to open it up and make it public for you, all right? So that you can have access to my files, all right? But this is the process. You're going to say it's private, and you're going to call this the exact same name that I recommend, which is MDEV1004-M2023, and then ISIS, which means this is your in-class exercise, all your in-class exercises. And notice it says it's available because in your account, you can only have, the repository must have a unique name, okay? I'm keeping it private. Please do not add a README file or a gitignore file or a license. This will change things remotely, and it will not be compatible with what we have in Visual Studio Code at this time. Okay, so please do not add these things, okay? Just click private and then click create repository. It's going to make our private repository, and it's going to give us some steering instructions, right? Guess what? We've done some of this already. We've made an init, an add, a commit. We've done all these things. What we need to do now is these last 3 lines of code. So copy these last 3 lines of code, go back to your terminal window in VS Code, and you can right-click and enter. Sometimes you may have to Command V. There's other ways, but you want to enter those commands. You can also type them in. You want to enter those commands here in the terminal window. Okay, that's what I've done. On Windows machines, just right-clicking will copy everything in here. Okay. On Macs, you may have to right-click and then click paste. Right. But for the most part, these are the commands I just put in here, and this is the exact same way that you would have your commands play out. What's happened now is, I'm going to leave this up for a second, but what's happened now is if I go back to my repository online, which had my steering instructions, if I refresh, you're going to see now that I have that one folder that's in here, which is in-class exercises, right? ICE1, which is empty right now. And the reason why it's there is because of my git file, right? Which is really a hack, if you think about it. It's an empty file that has nothing in it, but it's a file. So then, therefore, there could be something that I'm putting in. Okay? And that's what you should have online right now. Okay? So now I'm going to go back to you. Are you with me? You're good? We're good. Good. Daryl?
Yep.
How are we doing?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So now that we have all this, we're awesome. Now I need you to add me as a collaborator. This is important. So go to settings, please. Right? And you're going to go to collaborators and teams. It may ask you to log in, right, for the first time. And what you want to do is you want to add people, right? Or invite. Sometimes you'll see an invite or something like that, okay? When you add people, you just want to put in my last name. Here's how it's spelled. Just my last name, please. So TSILIOPOULOS, okay? Notice that there's 2 of me. And there's also this other guy, George. He's not me, okay? It's not this guy, right, which is Tom Siliopoulos, and it's like one big name. It's not that one. I use that one for other business that I do, okay? It's this one. It's just my last name, the first one that comes up, just my last name, which is right here, okay? That's the one you want to use, this guy, right? And then you add me. I only need read access. I don't need to be writing or whatever. I just need to be able to see your repositories. If you don't give me this and you give me a private repository and I cannot read it, right? It counts as not giving me a repository, right? So please do that. Please make sure you assign me to this. Okay. What if by accident you changed it to public instead of private? Well, if you go to settings, you can manage your access. So way down here under settings, I'm just gonna change these 150. Let's go back to 100 for a second. Way under here under settings, there's a danger zone. And in the danger zone, there's a couple things you can do. Let's say you messed up just now and you want to do all this again. You can delete the repository here. It'll ask you to do that. You can also change the visibility. So changing the visibility, I can change to public because I made mine private. If yours is public, you can make it private, all right? So you can do all these things. For me, in order for your Git repository to be the way it should be, please make it private. This way, your code is your own. No one can say that, hey, someone copied from me or whatever. I don't know how they had access. There's no access. It's private. The only person that has access is me, right? I may ask you to do this again for assignments. However, one thing we're going to say with assignments, I'm going to change it to public for myself right now, just for me, right? One thing that I want to talk about with assignments is, for assignments, it's not going to be like in-class exercises. I'm going to ask you for one repository, one assignment. So A1 will be its own repository. A2, its own repository. A3, its own repository. Test, its own repository. It'll be private. All those things will be private, but it'll be their own repositories. Why? Because there are special things that I need you to do, and they're not in-class exercises. In-class exercises is all your homework. That's what it is. Okay. Great thing is your in-class exercises at the end of semester, it's worth 40% of your final mark. Think about this as your little notebook. If we're gonna be drawing together, we're drawing code together. This is kind of your notebook, your history of all the stuff you've done, right? So there's none of this stuff where, well, I gave you my repository and there's one commit. If I see one commit that week, I'll be like, well, why, right? So please work with me. Add as many commits as you want. When do we add commits is always the question I get from students. I don't know when to add a commit, Tom. I put the work in and it works. Well, the answer is, here, I just made a commit. And this is my baseline. And now I'm going to add code eventually, right? When I add something, I add a functionality, make a commit. Go to the washroom, make a commit. Leave for the day, make a commit. Have a coffee, make a commit, right? Make a commit and as often as you can. Why? Because you won't lose your code. You can always step back. But typically what we do is when we add a function, a feature, or some kind of break fix debugging step, we do a commit. Why? Because I can track when that was done and what was done. I can track the history of your files. Again, it doesn't make any sense just to put one commit on a repository, ever. That's like backup. That's what that is. So again, there's 3 reasons why we use GitHub, and if I was ever going to ask you this on a quiz, I reserve the right to give you quizzes at some point in time during the semester. Could happen for bonus marks. Okay. Just saying. Here's the thing for the quiz, that if we're going to do a quiz at all, fancy things that can be done. 3 reasons to use GitHub, right? Collaboration. We want to share files, right? That's one thing. That's the reason that you use GitHub. Right? Backup, super important. If your dog eats your computer, right, locally, and you have all your code on your computer, or your cat, or something happens, you have a tea that you bring along with you, right, in your bag, and it spills all over your machine, and you lose all your code, that's on you, right? Backup, backup, backup. Like, it's important for you to back up your code. No company is going to support that. Oh man, I lost my computer. I dropped my bag in the elevator, and it broke. Whatever, and I lost all my code. They'll replace the computer, but they're gonna be really pissed, right? If you didn't put your code up on a backup somewhere. So backup is number 2. So, and then of course the most important piece is version control. We can always go like, well, it worked just now, but now it doesn't work anymore. Well, what we can do is we can step back. We can revert back to a previous version of our code. So version control is like by far the central thing that we do as developers. All right, we want to keep it together. Some institutions don't use GitHub, but a lot of them do. I would say 90% of the work that we're going to be doing here, the people use GitHub. Some people use Subversion, and some people use other things out there as well, okay? And the reason for this, like for example, game developers don't use GitHub, they use Perforce, right? And Perforce, what you do is you lock files in Perforce. And so I'm using that file, and you can't use that file when I'm using it, right? Perforce. And Perforce is also on a private server. Some people have real issues because Microsoft owns GitHub now, right? They're like, Microsoft owns my code, right? I don't want that. I want to have my own private server. And GitHub isn't the only Git, kind of cloud service out there, because that's what GitHub is. There's also GitLab, right? GitLab is very popular as well. And there's also Bitbucket, right? Bitbucket are another two services that you can use when you kind of do your code. One thing, the reason why people like to use Bitbucket is it ties in nicely with Jira, and Jira is the #1 project management tool you should be learning how to use at this point. All companies pretty much use Jira, de facto standard for project management and for Scrum. And Atlassian, who owns Jira, also owns Bitbucket and also owns Trello. They own all those things, right? So some people elect to use Bitbucket for that reason. But for our course, we're going to be using GitHub. Okay, just letting you know. So there's other stuff out there, but we're not going to use those things. We're going to use this. And back to here. So this is our ISIS. You should be able to see this kind of our folder structure. And what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to put this up on Blackboard. So Blackboard, it's not just week 1 and it's going to be static. It's going to ensure it has my PowerPoints. Okay, exciting, right? But what's more important than the PowerPoints is other stuff that I'm actively putting in there for you. For example, this is my GitHub link for the semester. So, of course, GitHub link for in-class exercises. Okay, that's what it is. So anytime you need to look at my code and compare my code to your code, please use this. One thing I always get is, Tom, you're too fast, right? Or I didn't get that. Or my code doesn't work. I did exactly what you did. My answer to students is, if you did exactly as I did, it would work, right? So please check my code, check your code and compare my code to your code. And then this is where it's going to be. So we're going to be actively doing this together, as opposed to, you don't know how to do this and you don't have a code base. Now, there's some philosophies about this. Some professors might be like, don't give them the code. They can just give you your code back. But remember, there's always something that you're going to do on your own back to me. For today, no. For today, what I want you guys to do is exactly what I've done here. Starting off with your in-class exercise for this week, which is due Sunday at midnight. And we're at 4% of your final grade, 4, right? Is make a Git repository that has your in-class exercises in them, your first in-class exercise in it, and we're going to add stuff to it in a second, all right? But this is what I want you guys to do. When you record your video, all right, I don't want you to upload a video file on Blackboard. Please do not give me MP4s or a MOV file or something else like that. It needs to be a working link. So it could be YouTube, it could be whatever, Loom. Some people like to use Loom. Some people use something. Use YouTube, it's easier. Please make it unlisted. Okay, if you're afraid of showing your face or whatever, make it unlisted. It doesn't have to be private. Please don't make it private, because what happens is some students make it private and then I don't have access to it. Again, the rule is, if I don't have access to the GitHub repository or your video, it's like you didn't give it to me. All right, I'm not going to ask for it. I'm just going to say no access. Right. So please make sure you guys are grad students. My expectation for you guys is a little bit higher. My expectation is that you give me a link that's working, that's unlisted, please, on YouTube. It's very simple. When you make your link, how do you record your screen? Any screen recording software is okay, but again, I recommend OBS, right? So OBS is definitely something that you can do. OBS is a free, kind of tool you can download, OBS Studio. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it just does screen recording. Very simple to set up. I didn't do it today because I was using other things, but very simple to set up and so on. And it easily connects to YouTube if you have a YouTube channel. If you don't have a YouTube channel, get one. It's very simple to kind of put together, and it's your own. Unlist your videos so that way you don't have to worry about people stealing your stuff or whatever. If you're worried about, security or, personal theft or whatever people are worried about, identity problems, just make them unlisted when you submit them to me. I'm perfectly happy with it if you do it. Okay, that's what I want you guys to do. And, but there's other tools you can certainly use as well. You don't have to use OBS Studio. Some people use Discord. Perfectly fine. Go on Discord, you know, put together a video call, and then you record your Discord. You can totally do that too. There's many ways to do that, especially when you're working with a partner, right? Teams. There you go. There's another way of recording your stuff. You record it and you put it up on YouTube. Someplace that's up. That's what I'm going to do later on today, right? So many ways of recording your screen. I don't care to see your face. Not for you, not for in-class exercises. However, for assignments, I will ask you to make a title card, one PowerPoint slide that says, "Hi, my name is Tom, and this is my partner, Sam. And Sam and I are doing assignment 1, right? Here's the video." In the videos, when it comes to working with partners for assignments, you know, I only need one partner to talk. I know people are like, both partners should talk. Some professors might say, everyone's got to talk in the video. But that's not really realistic, right? Because some people aren't great at talking, right? I want your best presenters to present your assignments. Just like if I was going to do project management with you. My project management course, I have one person presenting everything. That best presenter, the person who loves to present, the person who's a great presenter, right? And in reality, why would I put the weakest presenter to present my product? I would never do that. I would get the best presenter, the presenter that's awesome to do my product presentations, right? So that's what I want when you're working with a partner. However, when you're doing an in-class exercise, or you're doing your own assignment, or you're doing your tests, all of those are going to require videos. You need to do it. Here's what I need from you for your video. It needs to be heard. I got to be able to hear you 100% clearly. I'm not going to accept closed captioning as a submission, all right? So some people said, like, I don't like talking on my video, and I'm going to give you a closed caption video. Unless you have an accommodation for this, like an actual letter of accommodation, the answer is no, right? And it needs to be your screen. Again, some people, what they do is they submit a video that they haven't checked. That's like giving me code that that has errors in it, right? Or bugs in the code. Why would you give me bugged code, right? Don't give me bugged code. Check your video, right? If your video doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for me. Check your video out. Can you hear it? Can you see it? What is it recording? Are you recording your screen or some other screen? Maybe you have 5 screens at home, right? I want the screen that I need to see. Demonstrate your app, okay, as much as possible. Here's something else. When we use our apps, we're going to be using probably Android or iOS. You can demonstrate it inside of your Xcode simulator if you want. And for Android or iOS, you could certainly screencast your app as well on the screen, right? However you want to show me your app working is fine. I like to use something called LD Player, though, for Android. So LD Player, which is an Android emulator, LD Player. It's a great little Android emulator for that allows you to play games. I'm sorry about the images, but it allows you to play games. And if it allows you to play games, guess what? It's probably going to run your little app, right? And that's why I use it. There are other emulators out there as well. For example, the emulator that's built into Android Studio, but it sucks, right? So don't use that, right? I mean, it's got, by the way, I have to be fair. You know, JetBrains, the people behind Android Studio, have done a fantastic job to improve the product over the years, okay? So it's way better. But LD Player, to me, especially LD Player 9, is probably far easier to use. It's a separate product that has nothing to do with Android Studio. So if your Android Studio doesn't work, doesn't matter, you have this emulator. And it's a great way of checking to see if your Android Studio can connect to a device, because this acts like a separate device altogether. And you know it's separate than Android Studio, so it's probably going to work. So LD Player is a great way of doing it. And so, for example, I'm just going to bring up LD Player here. Here's LD Player. And let's say I'm going to check out a game that one of my students made at another institution, right? I'm going to try this out. So this is a game that was made with Unity, and you can see that it's going to totally play in LD Player, no problem. All right, so kind of new game, right? You can see that this is some kind of tower defense game or whatever, but you can see how this works. So that's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to, to be able to show me sometimes in a video, the app that you've been working with or whatever. And again, make the video unlisted. That's the stuff that I want you to see, okay? This week is no different. When you submit your video, you're going to say, "Hi, Tom, my name is, and here's my GitHub repository." You can see here that I have my GitHub repository that has a folder inside of it called In Class Exercise 1, right? And I've got all my files here that you want. And by the way, let's run the app. Here's the app in Visual Studio Code, and here it is. It's working. Hey, thanks, Tom. See you. That's it. I mean, that's literally what I want you guys to do this week. If you guys can't do this, then all the other stuff we're doing after this is too difficult, right? Okay, it's like super easy to do. Okay, and it's worth 4% of your final grade. I'm paying you big marks for it, like more than most professors. They'll give you 1% for this. So in effect, you're getting like 2 freebies. Okay, so this is it. So this is OBS. This is how I'm recording it and everything else. And I put it up on GitHub. We're back to this, right? And these are the commands, the basic commands: add, commit, and push. Add, commit, and push. Add, commit, and push. That's all you're going to be doing for the most part, right? You might pull, right? Which for your test, I might make you pull something. I might make say, pull my repository from this thing for your test to start off. Like some kind of starter code I might give you. Or pull the repository from this assignment for some starter code. I might do that with you guys, right? And I'll be pulling your repository to check out your code a lot of times too, right? So that's what we're going to do. But mostly it's, you know, basically add, commit, and push all the time, over and over again. And I'm going to show you this as we go. All right, so now that we've done our first commit, let's go back and talk about some more terminologies. We want to kind of merge, again, like I said, some kind of feature into our main branch. That's what happens. And this merging process can be ugly, right? And it's ugly because if you're working with somebody else, it can be a real challenge. So how do you kind of overcome this thing? So I want to talk about this, not just for here for this course, but for the future, because you're going to be working with other people 99% of the time, right? There are different approaches. One of them is, have a GitHub director. One of your team members is the person who owns the GitHub account. And then what you do is you make pull requests. You do a pull request, you make some changes, you pull the code, it's the same code base. You do some magic on the code, fix it, add a feature, whatever, and then you do a pull request to the owner of the GitHub repository. The owner then checks their code and does the merging on their own. Okay, and that's kind of a very easy way to do it. That's the way it can be done, and you can control the main branch, which is your single source of truth, really, for your application. If you don't do that, and if you do even the merging process, and even if you do it great, you could destroy the main branch, the commit. That means you'd have to revert, okay? And we don't want that. So always, connect with your administrator, whoever that's going to be for your GitHub repository. If you own it, right, and you have a feature that you want to use, you've got to do the feature on a branch and you merge it in. Merging is best done with a tool. Okay? I'm all for command line. But merging with a tool is a little easier. You can use Gitkraken, you can use whatever you like that you used before to merge. It's just easier because you can see the stuff. There's also some tools that are built into Visual Studio Code that you can use as well. Okay. We won't be doing much merging in this course, but just in case you get to there, that's kind of an issue that we always kind of run through. Okay. I talk about all this stuff here, and you guys should know about the command line. I did installation of Git. We did all this part. And we talked about some Git basics and navigating GitHub and all that stuff. Setting up a GitHub account, if you haven't done so already. All that stuff is here in the PowerPoint slide for your viewing pleasure. There are some additional apps that I recommend. One of them is SourceTree. If you're someone who likes to use a tool, a minimalist tool, right? And you don't want to use command line. Tom, I'm afraid of command line. I don't like it. I don't want to kill my computer. You're afraid of destroying your machine or something. I don't care how it gets to GitHub. Reality, I would like you to learn command line, but I'm not going to monitor what you do and how you do it, even for the people online. I'm not going to say, did you use command line for this? How do I know, right? The only thing I know is that I went up with GitHub and I have the right commits. So if you want to use a tool, the answer is you can. It's part of the flexibility of this course, right? So this is kind of a common UI. The other one is Gitkraken, which I've also given you here. Gitkraken is a very nice tool, and there is a pro version that you can get as well. I'm not sure you guys have. Do you guys use Gitkraken at all? You guys heard of Gitkraken? No. Good tool. And one thing that you can do is you can get the GitHub Education Pack. If you go to GitHub Education, please do this. If you sign up for GitHub and if you prove that you're a student, right, there is an amazing student developer pack that you can get for GitHub. An amazing pack. Please, I recommend you get it. All right. Here's what it includes. Okay. And I'm talking about lots of stuff. All right. So if you scroll down, DigitalOcean credits, Microsoft Azure credits, right? Namecheap, a free domain from Namecheap. Okay. JetBrains Pro account to use things like all the JetBrains tools, which is amazing. Things like ReSharper C++, amazing tool sets. Name.com, GitHub, Heroku, right? We used to use Heroku for this kind of course as well. Heroku now has gone private, right? And you need to do that. More about Visual Studio Code, GitHub Code Spaces, which is awesome. GitHub Pages, MongoDB with kind of with $50 of credits, right? And so on. GitLens. And if you scroll down, you can see that there's a ton of additional tools like the Pro GitHub Gitkraken client that you can get for free, right? So there's a ton of tools here, and I recommend you look at it. We may come back to this later on this semester because if you look down, there's a lot of stuff that this includes. Take a look. Stripe. Remember we talked about payment gateways? There it is right here. Stripe, right? And a bunch of other ones. Okay, Arduino, if you're into that kind of thing, right? Making iOS or IoT devices and all that stuff. And many, many others. It keeps going and going and going. All this is free if you subscribe to the education pack. Please do so today. It takes a few days to validate yourself sometimes. And you need to have a student card or something to prove that you're a student and a valid Georgian College student ID. But then you can get this GitHub education pack. Okay? Please do so. Back to this. So we have our Gitkraken. Gitkraken is a great little client and it's visual. So if you're a visual person and you want to see how GitHub works visually, all the commits and doing the merges and everything, Gitkraken is for you. One other one, if you're a minimalist and you just want something to help you merge, then desktop.github.com. GitHub actually provides its own little desktop app and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just minimalist. There's not fancy, graphics. It doesn't do anything like that, but if you don't like command line, then GitHub also provides this tool. Okay, again, for me, just to reiterate, it does not matter how you put it up on online. It doesn't matter to me, as long as I have the right commits and so on. Questions around version control, GitHub. We just talked all about that. Installing Visual Studio Code and setting it up, updating it. Daryl, you good? Daryl's my friend, my only friend online today that stayed on. All right.
Yep.
All right. We're sitting at 9:40, and I think I'd like to take a short break. I've talked for a bit of time. My voice is going to die, right? Let's take a 5-minute break. We're going to go from 9:40 to about 9:45, washroom break, water break, all that kind of stuff. We'll come in and we'll do the next part, which is installing NVM and Node.js. Okay? I'll stop recording now.